In the last few minutes, Theresa May has given an update about Brexit discussions with the European Union. Speaking on the second day of the summit in Brussels, Mrs May said she was positive about what the negotiations had achieved so far. Earlier, the head of the European Council, Donald Tusk, said EU leaders would begin to prepare for talks about a trade deal with the UK. The Prime Minister acknowledged a lot more was still, she said there was still some way to go.
I am ambitious and positive for Britain's future and for these negotiations, but I know we still have some way to go. Both sides have approached these talks with professionalism and a constructive spirit, and we should recognise what has been achieved to date. The UK and the EU share the same objective of safeguarding the rights of EU nationals living in the UK and UK nationals living in the EU. EU citizens have made a huge contribution to our country, and let me be clear that whatever happens, we want them and their families to stay. While there are a small number of issues that remain outstanding on citizens' rights, I'm confident that we are in touching distance of a deal. On Northern Ireland, we've agreed that the Belfast Agreement must be at the heart of our approach, and that Northern Ireland's unique circumstances demand specific solutions. It is vital that joint work on the peace process is not affected in any way. It is too important for that. And both sides agree that there cannot be any physical infrastructure at the border and that the common travel area must continue. We have both committed to delivering a flexible and imaginative approach on this vital issue. This Council is an important moment. It is a point at which to assess and reflect on how to make further progress. My speech in Florence made two important steps which have added a new impetus to the negotiations. I gave a firm commitment on the financial settlement, and I proposed a time-limited implementation period based on current terms, which is in the interest of both the UK and the EU. Both sides agree that subsequent rounds have been conducted in a new spirit. My fellow leaders have been discussing this morning, and I believe that it is in the interests of the UK that the EU27 continues to take a united approach. But if we are going to take a step forward together, it must be on the basis of joint effort and endeavour. We must work together to get to an outcome that we can stand behind and that works for all our people.
Theresa May speaking in the last few moments in Brussels. Well, in a moment we'll talk to our political correspondent Alex Forsyth, who's in Westminster for us this morning. But first to Brussels, and Adam Fleming is there for us. Adam, what is the feeling on the ground about how this summit has gone for Theresa May?
Well, the EU leaders of the other 27 remaining countries seem to have gone out of their way to help Theresa May at this summit, to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative when it comes to the Brexit process. Think back to yesterday when the Prime Minister first got here and she did that long walk from the front door to the summit room. The whole way she was accompanied by Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel. Gone the images of Theresa May standing by herself at her chair at the summit table with no one talking to her. That's the first thing. Angela Merkel's press conference in the middle of the night last night at the end of the first day of talks, saying that, OK, there wasn't progress on the first phase of talks, sufficient progress to move to phase 2 of the talks yet, but they were happening in a constructive atmosphere, and that the British media was misrepresenting how well that they were going, and that phase 2 could be on the way. And then look at the summit conclusions that were adopted by the 27 EU leaders in the meeting they've just been having separately while Theresa May was doing her news conference. It took them 90 seconds to adopt their conclusions, which will open the way for them to start preparing internally for trade talks and talks about the future relationship between the UK and the EU. That is the aspect that the European Council President Donald Tusk chose to tweet about after that 90 seconds of discussions that they had on that. He didn't tweet to say no sufficient progress has been made. He didn't tweet to say UK needs to go much further in the Brexit negotiations to meet us and meet our demands. He tweeted that he wants to start getting ready for phase 2 of the Brexit talks. So as I said, European leaders basically going out of their way to make the Brexit process look like it's going well, not that it's going badly.
And it'll be interesting, Adam, to see if further news conferences that we're expecting there this morning mirror the sort of language that Theresa May has been using in the last few minutes. You know, she was talking about standing alongside the EU as a partner, our continent, shared objectives, that sort of language.
Yes, so I know for a fact that the British delegation have been in touch with other countries in the run-up to this summit to create this positive atmosphere, and moments like the Macron-Merkel-May moment that look kind of accidental and just an accident of timing, but are actually carefully planned. So it will be intriguing to see, yes, the phrases and the notes that other leaders strike. Although when the leaders were arriving for their summit this morning for day 2 on the red carpet, you heard people like the Prime Minister of Malta, Joseph Muscat, saying that last night Theresa May gave her best performance ever at an EU summit, that she was more candid and a better performer than she had been before. But then you get people like the President of Lithuania saying, yeah, rhetoric is one thing, they still want detailed commitments on the actual technical Brexit negotiations, which brings us to what the big stumbling block is at the moment. The big blockage is about the UK's financial obligations. The EU wants to agree a methodology for calculating how much money the UK owes the EU for commitments it signed up to while it was a member. And you'll notice in the press conference, Theresa May was asked by our colleague Laura Kuenssberg if she would deny reports which have been swirling around this press room this morning, that privately Theresa May has told EU leaders she is prepared to give them more money than was implied in the Florence speech. Now, the Prime Minister would say, I imagine, and her advisors would say, that the Florence speech was very carefully worded. It offered to say that the UK would make financial contributions for the next 2 years of the EU budget, so no one would be out of pocket, but she also talked about living up to financial obligations. So she's made the message. What leaders now want is the detail of what she's actually prepared to pay for.
OK, Adam, thank you very much.